Hey guys, what is going on? Shah here, and today we are back exploring our Guardian Druid. Today we're going to be taking a look at the talent tree. I'm going to be breaking down the talents for you guys, each and every one. Well, I should say almost each and every one. There are going to be a few I will be kind of skipping over or talking very briefly about because they just have no relevance in the Mythic Plus scene at all. So if you do have any questions about that, please feel free to message me on my stream on Twitch or on Discord, or leave it in the comment section below, and I'd be more than happy to have some discourse about that. Now, I do want to apologize that this video is taking a while. My TLDR came out about 2 weeks ago, but if you're a human being living on Earth, you know there's this little thing called coronavirus going around, and it's definitely affected my life, and both personal and work life, so I've been extremely busy, so I've been trying to get this content out. So I'm going to try to get the videos out a little bit faster than it has been, but just please bear with me while I make those adjustments. Don't mind the pun. Anyways, let's get started. So I'm going to be breaking down the talent build here, or I should say I'm going to be breaking down the talent tree. I'm going to go by each tier. I'm going to talk about pretty much each talent and what it might bring to the table, and then at the very end I'm going to summarize it up, talking about which ones you may run because of maybe the weekly effects that's currently going on, or the dungeon you're running, or maybe the composition you're running with, so the different classes that are in your group. So in our first tier row, our level 15 row, we have a few options to choose from. We have Brambles, Blood Frenzy, or Bristling Fur. Brambles is a very cool talent that has a few layers to it. Passively, it's going to absorb and reflect the damage from each attack, resulting in a fair amount of damage mitigation over the course of a dungeon. It also allows players to turn a damage reduction cooldown, which is Barkskin, turning it into a pseudo-offensive cooldown by pulsing AoE damage during the duration of its effect. This damage isn't insanely strong, but it will help you hold threat on the pull where you are also trying to keep yourself alive. So it's a very interesting talent, a lot of cool synergies with other things in the talent tree. Blood Frenzy is pretty straightforward. Every time your Thrash deals damage, you gain 2 Rage. This fills the awkward gap of when Guardian Druids need to kite and then have no mitigation active when they go back in once their dodge resets. With this talent, you can comfortably kite, and then when you feel a little bit sturdier than you did, you can actually go back in with a couple stacks of mitigation up of Iron Fur. All I can say is that this is just a good passive rage gen that doesn't rage cap you. Speaking of rage cap, Bristling Fur is the last talent in this row, and unlike the other two, it's not a passive ability, and it will have to be used frequently to get its full effect throughout the course of a key. Sadly, all this ability does is really rage cap you for the 8-second duration and then leaves you feeling naked for the remaining 32 seconds of the cooldown. My suggestion on this ability to Blizzard would be to lower the amount of rage that you're going to get per hit, but also lower the cooldown. I think more players would use this talent if that was the case. It's just something that isn't practical to take in Mythic Plus in today's current meta. Our level 30 row doesn't give us many useful options. Tiger's Dash, Ursul's Vortex, and Wild Charge are your options on this row. Tiger's Dash and Wild Charge both have the same complication, which is that the tanks are in bear form 95% of the time during a key, and since you're tanking mobs, you can't practically go out of bear form to use these abilities to their full effect. Wild Charge can be a flavor of choice, but Ursul's Vortex is going to be too strong to pass up unless you are running with a Resto Druid, for example. Ursul's Vortex is typically going to be a lock-in since it has several uses. In an 8-yard radius, all enemies will be slowed by 50%, and upon leaving the area of effect for the first time, they will be sucked back into the center. This can serve as both a kiting method to, kiting mobs, or as a way to group up mobs effectively, and can replicate a mini mass grip similar but not as quite as strong as the Death Knight's Gorfiend's Grasp. The DPS players in your group who are running Essence of the Focusing Iris will thank you for doing this. Our level 45 row gives us access to other Druid specialization trees. All 3 trees have a passive effect, which affects us in bear form, but also some on-use abilities from the toolkit of that affinity. So Balance and Fair Affinity are fun to play around with, but aren't practical in high-end Mythic Plus, and similar to talents on previous rows, just aren't great for the mere fact that you're going to be in bear form the majority of the dungeon while tanking. Balance Affinity increases the range of your abilities by 5 yards, which can be nice, and Feral Affinity will increase your movement speed by 15%, which can be great for speedruns or farming, but in our absolutely pale in comparison to the Restoration affinity. This affinity gives us access to the Restoration toolkit. Ysera's Gift is the passive that we're going to gain from this, meaning every 5 seconds we are healing ourselves for 3% of our maximum health, and in the current state of the game, a geared Guardian Druid will have close, if not over 1 million health. That means 30k healing ticks every 5 seconds throughout a 30 to 40 minute key, resulting in very high HPS. Also, that it acts as a smart heal, meaning that if you are at full health, it'll heal a nearby party member for that amount. Not only that, but having access to Swift Mend, Wild Growth, and Rejuvenation will allow us Guardian Druids to off-heal during times of trouble. We can even do this while kiting mobs. Don't be afraid to shift out of bear form to throw out a Swift Mend on yourself or an injured ally. This talent choice is objectively a lock-in if you plan on pushing any kind of Mythic Plus content. The level 60 row has some flexibility with choice. Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, and Typhoon all have their uses and will be chosen based on the composition of the group, the dungeon, or the weekly affixes, but I'm going to hint on this as I talk about each talent. So Mighty Bash is super straightforward. It's a single target, 5-second stun. It's a great CC ability if your group does not have many stuns. You may take this if you're playing in a composition that has a lack of stuns, like Fury Warrior, Fire Mage, Discipline Priest, and classes of that nature. Mass Entanglement is great and has a tremendous range. The target and all enemies within a 15-yard radius will be rooted for 30 seconds. This is also on a 30-second cooldown, so you can ultimately keep a group permanently positioned in the spot you want it to as long as you are within range. I like this talent in a few dungeons, including King's Rest for the patrol group in the first boss room, Atal Desar for Priestess and the ads that spawn, as well as Temple of Sethralis for the amount of patrols in the latter half of the dungeon. Then we have Typhoon. Typhoon is typically the talent of choice in the Druid community. It's a great knock on a short cooldown, which can serve as both a kiting method and as well as an interrupt for both interruptible and non-interruptible casts. Like I mentioned with Ursul's Vortex, you can use them in conjunction with each other to create a mass grip effect in order to group up mobs efficiently. This brings us to our 75 row, which has 2 strong choices and are determined mainly by the playstyle. Soul of the Forest, I am not even actually going to talk about here. Its damage increase and rage generation it provides is actually kind of embarrassing. I'm pretty sure it was intended to help single target situations, only which Galactic Guardian and Incarnation both do a way better job of and have an impact on trash pulls. So Galactic Guardian was added as a talent choice, coming out of Legion, since a lot of Druids were running a legendary setup that came from the balance tree, allowing them to play like a ranged tank build who would just destroy its victims with nature magic. I wish this talent held up to its Legion build, but sadly, it is what it is. But upon doing damage, you will randomly proc a free Moonfire on a target, applying your damage over time effect to it. Also, whenever this happens, your next Moonfire the cast will do 300% increased damage and generate a rage. This will result in a higher sustained damage over the course of a key, but less burst damage to the Incarnation counterpart. So then that brings us to Incarnation. Incarnation is currently my preferred playstyle. Not only does it make all of your abilities on a 1.5 second cooldown, but Mangle now cleaves 3 targets. This is a lot of synergy with our Blood Frenzy talent, but also a few upcoming talents that I haven't discussed quite yet. Being able to have big offensive cooldowns, which also serves as defensive cooldowns during heavy physical damage, means you feel basically unstoppable whenever this is active. When it comes down to it, both of these talents are strong, and I have yet to see a reason why one is better than the other, so play whichever one you like more. The level 90 row is probably our best defensive row. We have the option of Earth Warden, Survival of the Fittest, and Guardian of a Loon. So Earth Warden, hands down, is the best option when pushing high-end Mythic Plus for the simple fact that it scales the highest with key level, since it is a consistent flat damage reduction for auto attacks. Compared to its other options, every time you thrash, the direct damage that you do with Thrash will then give you an Earth Warden buff, which stacks up to 3 times, and as long as you have a stack, the next auto attack you take will be reduced by 30% and then consuming one of those stacks. With Incarnation, the ability to spam Thrash with Incarnation active on the global cooldown will make you incredibly sturdy. Survival of the Fittest plays well into Brambles and some Essences, which I will discuss in a future video. It is a passive that reduces the cooldown of Barkskin and Survival Instincts by 33%. Making them a 1 minute cooldown and a 2.33 minute cooldown respectively. It is great for lower keys, but if you're playing with this talent, I would recommend switching if you find yourself falling over to trash when those cooldowns aren't active. Guardian of a Loon has great synergy with some Azurite traits, but won't scale as effectively into key level. Every time you mangle, your next Iron Fur will last 2 additional seconds, or your Frenzied Regen will heal you for 20% more. This is a talent that I wish was better to use in higher keys because I like the playstyle of it, to kind of have this combo system where you mangle and then use some kind of mitigation and make that choice. But unfortunately, it just can't compete with the nature of Mythic Plus at the moment with things hitting so ridiculously hard. This brings us to our last talent row and probably the most underwhelming row that we have. A few of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I am extremely disappointed in this row because many specs and classes, the 100 row is a huge power curve or some kind of fun abilities that come into play and you get access to. We get 2 very poor mitigation options and an underwhelming heal that requires us to stay still for 8 seconds. So, Rend and Tear is going to be the first choice that we're going to look at. Rend and Tear has synergy with Earth Warden, Incarnation, and Blood Frenzy, which is why I'm going to safely say that it's a lock-in. For each stack of Thrash that is applied to the target, the damage you take from them will be reduced by 2%, stacking up to 3 for a maximum of 6% for those who are really good at math. I also like this ability because it's passive, which allows me to spend more of my globals on more important abilities. Lunar Beam has one thing going for it, and that it's simply a cool-looking ability. The damage and healing are extremely underwhelming, and it has not scaled well into this expansion, and I hate to say it, but it's essentially a role-playing talent. Lastly, we have Pulverize. I've heard arguments for this ability. It's a large damage reduction of 9%, but it requires you to have at least 2 stacks of Thrash on the target, and upon pulverizing, it'll consume those stacks. If you like to play with this talent, I don't think there is anything stopping you. My counter argument to that is that if you're trading damage over time for direct damage for only an additional 3% damage reduction, which isn't going to make or break a key. Second, you are wasting a global, where global casts are extremely important for Guardian Druids to maintain Earth Warden stacks, which are a much better form of mitigation. Other globals like Mangled and Frenzied Regen are going to be much better for surviving than the mediocre damaging ability like Pulverize. I've just had some questions about this in the past, hence why I felt like I needed to dive a little bit more into this one. Well, that does it. Let's take a quick look back at the talent tree. Here is what a standard Guardian Druid talent tree will look like. Most of the time you'll be taking Blood Frenzy, you'll be taking Ursal's Vortex, Restoration Affinity, Typhoon, Incarnation, Earth Warden, Rend and Tear. Now, I do want to note you can trade Blood Frenzy for Brambles. This is a preference choice, a playstyle choice, and sometimes a dungeon choice. Ursal's Vortex can also be traded out for Wild Charge if you prefer playing with this talent. The only time I would recommend not taking Ursal's Vortex is if you're maybe playing with a Resto Druid already who has access to it. Restoration Affinity is pretty much a lock-in. Typhoon, the level 60 tree, this can be traded out for any ability that you feel like you might need for the dungeon. Incarnation and Galactic Guardian, these are definitely tradable. This is a totally preference. I like Incarnation a lot, especially with the synergy that it has with different Azurite traits as well as essences. Galactic Guardian is also a fine choice as well. Earth Warden is going to be a lock-in, and Rend and Tear is going to be a lock-in. So mainly the trees that are going to be changing is 15, 30, 60, and 75. But that pretty much does it for the breakdown of the tree. Alright, well that sums up the talent tree guide. I hope this information has been helpful. If you guys do have any questions about any talents that I might have skipped over, or that I haven't explained completely, enough or in depth, I would love to have some discourse in the comment section below, or feel free to hit me up on Twitch or Discord. I hope you guys are staying healthy out there, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care.